Hi there, this is Irina Barnett, and I love having conversations about life's defining moments and understanding human experiences. Moments That Define Us podcast is dedicated to healing the world one story, one defining moment at a time. So let's get into another conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Moments That Define Us podcast on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe so you know when the next episode is coming up. But not only subscribe, share with other people so we can build community around this podcast, so we can share more stories, more defining moments. Because as I always said, sharing a story has the power to heal. So subscribe and share, and let's build community. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Moments That Define Us. My name is Irina Barnett. Today on the podcast, I have Helen Hynson Vettori. She is an author. She is the International Book Impact winner. She is the former government employee. She held many different roles, including in the Department of Homeland Security. And she seems like the right person to talk to in the state of the world we are in today. She did a lot of emergency management for the biological incidents, including pandemic. She currently has 2 books out, Black Swan Impact and Black Swan Shock. The Black Swan Shock, I have actual copy, and Black Swan Impact, I listened to audibles. And it was inspired by the pandemic that we had in 2020, but it's written in the future. It's a political thriller, and it's amazing. So go check out her books, Black Swan Impact and Black Swan Shock. This is part of her trilogy, and she will have another book coming at some point, either next year or later, called Black Swan Terror. And she put all of her experience that she had working in the government into these books, and just incredible. Her writing is wonderful. So go check out her books and then listen to our episode. So let's get into the conversation with Helen Hynson Vettori. Ms. Helen, welcome to Moments That Define Us podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you because I've told you before we started recording that I've been listening to your book. I've been researching you. And so I feel like I've been living in your world, so to speak, right? Through your writing and through your books. And you seem to be the right person right now during the time we live in to talk to, because you used to work for the government. So hopefully you'll tell me some secrets or whatever you.
But I might have to kill you if I tell you the secrets.
All jokes aside, Ms. Helen, I wanted to learn a little bit more about you, before we get into your incredible books and Ms. Helen, for those of you who are listening, she has a big poster with 2 of her books that are currently out of her trilogy. And then the third one will be coming a little bit later. We're going to talk to her about that. But before we talk to you about your books, I wanted to learn a little bit about you and what makes you who you are today. When I was researching you, I read that you love art. So I wanted to ask you, have you always been creative, or have that kind of came later in life?
I think I've always been creative. I was somebody at a toddler's age using crayons and so forth, just like any toddler, but I really enjoyed that perhaps more than others. I don't know if that's true, but that's just kind of the feeling that I got. And I continued that love of creativity as I got older, and it just became a joy to me every day, including in high school, so much so that I won the art award for high school. And then in college, I was thinking that I was going to be a trauma surgeon. And so I went into pre-med. But, I took a little studio art class here, a little art history there. And lo and behold, 3 years passed by, and my advisor said, "Oh my gosh, Helen, you can finish your degree and graduate with studio art and art history, but you will not graduate with any kind of medical anything unless you stay for several more years." So it just was something that I enjoyed and followed, and to this day, I love.
And what kind of art do you enjoy? Do you paint? Do you draw? Like what kind of, because I mean, you're writing books, obviously, right? Which is beautiful type of art. But I wonder what other kind of art you enjoy.
Yes, I love all the graphic arts to include acrylic. I don't use oil so much. And I love to draw with pencil, with pastels, with any kind of implement, colored pencils, watercolor, but a lot of the arts that you think of right off the bat when you talk to an artist, a two-dimensional artist. But then in addition to that, I love the craft side of it. I do
Mm.
stained glass and mosaics, and I dabble sometimes in doing some sculpting, but I'm not very good at it. And just anything that allows creativity to come forth is calming and takes me to a new place. And really, that's kind of how I ended up writing. I needed to find solace.
I agree with you that being, doing any sort of creativity is very peaceful, is very beautiful. You feel like even if you're not selling, you're doing anything, because a lot of the time people think like, oh, I have to do so then I sell, so no, just for the soul. I think it's so beautiful. I started doing paint by number with my kids, and I love it because I can't paint myself. So like paint by number seem like a good, follow the numbers.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to writing, you said because you loved art so much, that's how writing came to you because you needed to find solace. I wonder, what are some of the writers that influence or inspire you?
Well, my very favorite writer is Vince Flynn. He since passed away, and there have been a couple of authors who have taken up that genre, his characters, and I love them because I love fast-paced and creative fiction that is just thrilling and mesmerizing uh, and connected to history and politics. And it's intriguing. I just love it. But then I also like other authors. Believe it or not, Lewis Carroll is a favorite of mine. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass are fantastic because the fantasy that he offered us is so wonderful and expansive into a universe that, gee, I would never have thought of. And how lucky we are to be able to experience something that he created for us. So I will say that I can gravitate toward just about any genre and
Mm-hmm.
enjoy any genre. But like I said, the Vince Flynn type Mitch Rapp series is my absolute favorite.
Are you the type of person that like to reread books that you read before, or you kind of like one and done?
Well, that's funny. And I laughed because my husband said to me, "Why don't we donate some of these books?" I read a book and then I put it on the bookshelf. And I say, "Well, because I can enjoy them all over again in a couple of years." And there are some that I might read on a very regular basis, and
Hmm.
particularly at Christmas. I have some stories that just are meaningful. They were meaningful to me as a child, and we've since passed it along to our grandchild. So, it's something like that that is heartwarming and just part of our routine.
Yeah. Do you read regular books, or do you like the digital stuff, like a Kindle or any other?
Sure. I do both. I
Mhm.
love to feel a page. I love the weight of a book and the smell. People look at me when I say that, but there's a distinctive smell. Perhaps it's the ink, perhaps it's the paper. I don't know, but there's something compelling about a real book. On the other hand, I do use Kindle on a regular basis, something that is easy to carry. Certainly, when you're traveling, you want to have space in your carry-on luggage, and sometimes books are pretty, much of a space hog. So there you always want your iPad or whatever with you anyway. So downloading a book is great too.
Another thing you and I have in common, because you said when you tell people the smell of a book, people kind of laugh. I am the same. I am the same. Either I'm taking a book from the library or I'm buying a brand new book. I tell my kids, and my kids are 6 and 8, right? So I'm like, smell it, smell it. Do you smell this? And my kid's like, Mom, what? I'm like, oh, I hope. And my kids, I mean, they are still little, so they don't have Kindle and they like real books. And I hope that they will carry that. But I completely understand what you mean by the smell of a book. It's just something so beautiful, and the feel of a book as well. Now, I wanted to get into your books. Speaking of real books. So, you wrote 2 beautiful books. You have trilogy, but a third book will be coming. When will that be coming, Helen?
I would say it would be no sooner than 12 months from
Okay.
now. It may be as much as 18 months, but it's just in the early editing phase. And as you can imagine, that is the hardest phase because the creative phase just flows and it's organic, whereas the editing phase is really getting down to the nuts and bolts.
I speak to so many different authors because I love reading a lot. And that's what every author said. Editing parts depends on somebody else, and that might take a little bit longer. But the books that you wrote is Black Swan Impact, Black Swan Shock, and then the third one will be Black Swan Terror, right?
Correct. Yes. And it's important to define what a black swan is. A black swan is not the animal that you find in Australia. Sure, there are those birds there. And I was just in Australia last year and was just awestruck by these beautiful creatures. But if it's used as a term, it is a catastrophic event that could not be foreseen or imagined because of its unprecedented impact. So 9/11 would be a perfect example of that. If you recall, we just were stunned by the magnitude and the horror. And recovering from that was long and drawn. So
Yeah.
that's what a black swan is something that just hits you fast, hard, and well, there can be warning. For instance, Hurricane Katrina. We knew it was coming, but when it did hit, even though we had the warning, we just were overwhelmed and just dumbfounded by its superpower.
Before we get into the books, I wanted to read a few of the titles that you held when you were working at the government. So you are the former government employee of the Homeland Security Department. So you were and you can correct me if I said something, if some of the titles were not right, but emergency management specialist at the Department of Homeland Security, senior medical intelligence analysis and paramedic. You specialize in planning and preparing for biological incidents, including pandemic. So you have more than enough experience writing this political thriller books that you have. How many years did you work for the government?
So with the government, as a government employee, 11 years. Before that, I was a contractor. And let me just kind of tweak my resume there. Yes, a paramedic, but not with Department of Homeland Security. It was with a rescue squad, the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad. And that was really my first foray into a profession that has profoundly shaped me. Then, as for Department of Homeland Security, I was indeed the senior medical intelligence analyst, but also an emergency management specialist. And my focus was planning and preparing the federal government for biological threats to include pandemics, all the other threats as well. I worked with that, and it was across the entire government. So I was just one of the representatives who did the planning and preparing since 2005, when President George W. Bush tasked the federal government to prepare for what we knew would be an inevitable pandemic.
So wait, so in 2005, the George W. Bush tasked the government to prepare for pandemic that we had in 2020?
Well, you may not remember, there was a pandemic in 2009. That was the H1N1 pandemic. But the reason you likely don't remember, it wasn't the black swan that COVID was.
Okay.
It did circulate the world. It did cause a lot of morbidity and mortality, but in the United States, it was relatively low key. Not to belittle those who succumbed to it, but it wasn't the magnitude that we saw in 2020. So we responded and did things pretty okay, I would say, for 2009. But when I walked out the door in 2018, one, I was pleased with what I left behind, working with everyone to have the partnerships and the collaborations to set up things that we knew could happen and likely would happen. But I hadn't expected a pandemic to arise so soon as in 2020, because generally and historically, pandemics occur about every 30 or 40 years. And so that wasn't even 10 years. Well, let's see, 2009 and then 20. So it wasn't even 20 years later. It was 19 and so, or 11, I should say. So, I was taken aback. I was a little bit ill prepared in my mind for that, but as things unfolded, I agreed, yes, we need to lock down because we don't know how this illness is going to grip humanity. So take a step back, pause, collect all the data and information you can, and then go forward. But as the days wore on, I was dumbfounded. I became first angry, and then I had real just knots in my stomach because I couldn't unknow the things that I knew. I knew what planning and preparing had been going on since 2005. I knew what things were in place. And yes, every incident is unique. You start out with a general overview, and then you need to tailor to the specifics. But it didn't even seem like the foundations that were in place were utilized or even considered. And I would call my former boss, who had also retired, and she and I would just have discussions that made us on edge and worried and so forth. And like everybody else, when I would be on Zoom meetings with my families, um, I would talk, but I would get into rants and raves, unlike most people, or maybe like most people, I don't know. But my sister said to me, there's a story there. And I hadn't thought about it, but I knew that I was just knotted in my stomach and that I was nervous and anxious. And so I thought, well, writing is a cathartic thing to do. And so I really sat down just kind of journaling. But my sister's words stuck in my mind. And lo and behold, a story started to emerge. And I started sending passages, chapters to my siblings. And my brother just was amazed. He said to me, "How is it, even though the story I wrote was in the future and a different um, pandemic scenario, I predicted things days, weeks, even months in advance to what occurred real time in our current history." And I said to him, "Well, first of all, that was my job to understand things that would go about. But, second of all, I have the creativity outlet that allowed me to channel what I knew and my frustrations and my fears and put it in writing." And the reason it was, I guess, right for me to put it in the future, it gave a curtain, a barrier between the reality and the horrors of what was going on real time and something in the future so that we could learn lessons from that future story, so that we could maybe take away nuggets and apply them to try and avoid things that could possibly happen in our time.
So you were writing the book as the pandemic was happening because you
Yes.
retired in 2018. And so you started writing, what, about 2019? The pandemic really hit the States at 2020, right? So you writing in real time as this happening.
I actually started writing in 2020.
Okay.
The lockdown, like I said, originally, yeah, I agree with it. And that gave me a lot of time to focus on what was going on, gave everybody a lot of time
Oh,
to
yeah.
reflect. And so I would say starting about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks in from the declaration of the lockdown, I was writing fast and furious. And I had the entire first draft written within 1 month. So, I mean,
Wow.
it just poured out of me. It was something that wrote itself.
I can only imagine being the person that you are and the work that you've done in the past, seeing this unfold. Like, you probably, I mean, you said that you were furious, like, oh my gosh, what? It just seems, and to me, that I never worked for the federal government, it just seemed like that the administration that we had at the time, and funny enough have again, was not prepared at all. The stuff that were coming out of their mouths was just horrendous. And I wonder for you, what was, and I'm sure it's hard to pick, but like, what was the most frustrating thing that you were seeing them saying or doing that you were like, I don't know, are you out of your mind?
Yes, there is absolutely positively something I can point to immediately. And as a matter of fact, having worked in the field that I worked for all those years, whether as a paramedic out in the crisis on the scene or at the command and control end of it in the headquarters, communications are vital to making something work properly. When communications are good, things generally are good in response. When communications are poor, well, you break down easily or you go astray easily. And so the messaging being so, I'll say, disjointed or
Mhm.
misleading or incapable of offering explanation in a good way caused more problems than I think that should have been. And I can honestly say there was communication that we created over those years, starting in 2005, that was canned communication. Now, canned means it's general, but
Mhm.
the general information then can be followed up with specific information. And so let's say there was a mistake made, which everybody can understand mistakes can be made. The
Of course.
problem was there was no mea culpa. And so when you don't say, hey, we have learned something new. This is what it is, and this is why we need to do X, Y, or Z. And that explanation would allow people not to just go haywire, not understanding, or then losing trust or what have you. The trust and the follow through go hand in hand. And when you have people that stop doing what's good for the greater good, then that just makes everything really poor in terms of how to respond and recover.
You know, Miss Helen, I have to tell you, so your first book, Black Swan Impact, I listen on Audible because I drive a lot, my kids, and, I'm just out and about. So it was easier for me to listen to. There were a few times where I had to pause and listen to music or something else because it was hitting so close to home. Because again, okay, we're not wearing masks anymore. There's no lockdown, but the impact of the pandemic still hitting us. People talk the mental health, the how lonely people were, and all of that still hitting us, even though we are unmasked now and there's no lockdown and we can go freely travel and stuff. But one of your character in the book is President Piper. And excuse my language, I was like, what the F did he just say? And it just, because we store so much in a memory. So I remember the current president who was back then as well. I was like, oh my gosh, it just sounds like him. It just sounds like him. And so I had to stop a few times because it brought back so many memories from that time. But your writing is so good.
Oh, well, thank you. And your podcast name is perfect because there are moments that define us. And we often can point to, maybe a couple, maybe several things that cause us to be shaping our character, our way forward in life. And, this opportunity was something that I never foresaw when I retired. I thought I would, do my painting and traveling, and I just had no idea I was going to be writing. So COVID not only was a milestone for all of us around the world, but for me personally, it began me on a journey to write. And when I put the pen down, so to speak, on that first book, Black Swan Impact, I knew these characters had so much more to say. I hadn't intended to write one. And then all of a sudden, here I'm thinking, well, it's going to be three. And I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to be able to express things that I think or enjoy or want to share. And in the second book, I really tried to reach people in terms of if you are caught in a black swan, you can manage through. You can not just muddle through, but you can get through better if you do X, Y, and Z. And as a matter of fact, in the book club section, the 15th, I'll call it question, is actually a way to assess your readiness, your preparedness for emergencies, and then offers a way of how you can, make it better or it just get a start. And so that's become my crusade, is to try and get people to realize that if they prepare themselves and their families and their loved ones, to include their pets, then we all, as a community, as a residents of a state, of the country, of the world, make it a better place despite black swans.
You give the explanation of black swan that it's unforeseen event. Besides what you just said, to prepare, to prepare yourself, your family, your pets, is there anything else that the world can do to prepare for this? Or when they come and we kind of have to deal with them as those events come at us?
Yes, the short answer is yes. And I know from the planning and preparing that I did over those years, we not only worked across to state and locals, but we also worked across the big states, the other
Mhm.
countries. Particularly, it comes to mind that Australia was such a big partner. And um, the Japanese and the Koreans, not the Koreans, yes, the Koreans had a good start and application because they not only prepared globally in thinking, but and they got down to the individual and the messaging reached the individuals. So it can be done. Not that we won't have black swans, but you
Mhm.
can mitigate them. You can mitigate the effects on the entire community, on yourselves.
Okay, I want to ask you a couple of questions on your second book. So the first book, we know it was inspired by COVID. This for the second book, you said as you finished the first one, you knew that those characters have more story. I wonder if that was what was the inspiration besides giving your character more story? What was the inspiration for the second book?
Okay, well, let me take us back to lockdown time because, of course, that's still when I was deep on the computer, typing and typing. And when I had decided that second book was something I needed to move on to, I wasn't sure what the Black Swan would be, much less how the characters might change. So, as we all did, it was a beautiful day. I went out for my COVID walk, which could range anywhere from an hour to three, depending on how I felt and the day was. And I happened to see a neighbor who was also outside, and we kept social distance, but we waved at one another, and she brightened my day so much. Little girl named Millie Wiggins, a neighbor who has Down syndrome. And I just knew in my heart at that very moment that the new character that's introduced and expanded upon in the second book had to be like Millie Wiggins. So Marla Case is Millie
Mm-hmm.
Wiggins and was inspired by Millie Wiggins. So with that, I said to myself as I was walking along, okay, well, I have this character who I'm going to develop now. What could happen to her? And for some reason, I just started to think what disaster might be something that Millie uh, transferred into Marla might be able to handle without any background in emergency management,
Mm-hmm.
emergency action for her experience. And I thought, well, lots of people can be in lots of natural disasters, such as an earthquake. So I came back home and I started doing some research. There is a fault in the US, which many people don't know. Now, you may know of it having been back and forth to Oklahoma, but have you ever heard of the New Madrid Fault?
No.
Okay, well, surprise, surprise, it more or less is parallel to the Mississippi River. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew from my work that there was a very large earthquake, which they assume was an 8.2 on the Richter scale on that fault line. And it was so large an earthquake that the earth shook so greatly to the east coast that bells in the steeples of churches rang. So that gives you an idea of how great that was. That was in 1811, 1812. So I started doing research and read a lot of firsthand accounts. And I said to myself, these firsthand accounts will transfer into my characters and what they experience and what they need to face and overcome. So that's how that came about.
Can you tell us anything about the third book? I know it's still in editing, but it's called Black Swan Terror.
By the title, you can surmise that it's a terrorist attack, and you
Yeah.
get a little foreshadow of it at the end of the second book of Black Swan Shock, because one of the characters says, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up. And it leaves you hanging, because why are the hairs on the back of his neck raising? And so what it is the Olympics, for the first time ever in 2142, will be held on the moon. It no longer will be an Earth-based event, but the Olympics will now forevermore be an international, interstellar, whatever you want to say, not international, excuse me, interstellar event beginning there on the moon. And what a prime target for terrorists to strike there. It would be something that everyone around the universe would focus on. So that's the intent, to try and carry out an attack in that space.
Okay, I don't know. I'm going to ask you a question. If that's going to be a spoiler, don't answer. But are they terrorists from Earth, or are there life up in the universe?
In other words, are they non-humans?
Are they non-humans? Are they aliens?
No, they are humans.
Okay. And that, folks, is all Helen can tell us about her third book. Well, Helen, I have a question for you. Your second book, will your book be on Audible as well, just like your first one?
Yes, if you loved hearing the voice of Cherry McIntosh on the first book, Black Swan Impact, then you will love to hear her read Black Swan Shock. She is currently doing the recording, and I wouldn't be surprised if the release comes sometime in April, but it could be May or so. I'm not sure how long it takes for editing and so forth, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it in the early spring.
She is so good, because I like to read books, but another thing, like the digital version for me is listening to books, because I need to hear the voice. And she does all these voices so good. She does Piper so good, and Syia, and all this, it's characters from all the books, but I loved it so much. So yeah, no, I'm excited to listen to it as well. Miss Helen, once the third book comes out, do you think you have more books in you that you want to write?
Well, my gut answer is no, but who knows? I mean, I wasn't expecting to write anything at all, much less 3 books. What I do have on my immediate future is to do some more traveling and to continue my painting. And if one day some lightning bolt strikes my creativity in the word arts, then sure. I'm not going to say it can't happen. I'm just going to say I don't expect anything in the near future anyway.
Yeah. Oh, you never know. I'm sure you're going to take one of those walks. You're going to be somewhere in the world. Something comes to you, something will inspire you, and you will write something. Well, I just wanted to thank you for coming on the podcast. And I wanted to deeply thank you for your writing, because I have never read books like you wrote, that is political type of thriller in the future. That was usually like not my cup of tea, but thanks to you, it has become my cup of tea and coffee and a glass of wine. So thank you so much.
Honored. I'm honored. Thank you. I truly appreciate your thoughts, and I appreciate your podcast. And, you know, your audience is a part of you and a part of us collectively, who are readers, who enjoy books and look to books not just for escape, but for the value that it offers us throughout our life.
Absolutely. And your books, you know, you put all this knowledge from years working in different section, you put into the book, and you gave us the kind of the insight into the government, so to speak, right? And before we go, if you can tell everyone where they can find your books, where they can follow you and find out more information about you.
If you are an indie bookstore lover, your indie bookstore can offer it to you. The books are available worldwide. You can also go to your favorite Barnes and Noble or what have you. Amazon, of course, you can order from Amazon. It just depends on how the person chooses to shop, and they can order hardback, paperback, audio, ebooks. The audio is still yet to come for the second book, but it's coming. So it's all out there and available any way, shape, or form. You can also go to my website, helenhynson.vettori.com, and click on the links to buy the books. You can follow me on Instagram at Helen H. Vettori, and that's an almost daily place where I post something that could be about the books, could be about something that's interesting to me, or something that I enjoy. And it's just a fun little quip each day or most days. And finally, I have a Substack article that I put out monthly. And, that's mostly focusing on actual biological threats or concerns, because I like to keep my hand in that genre, so to speak.
Ms. Helen, I hope you have good rest of your day, and thank you for conversation today.
Thank you, and good luck to you.